ever get that feeling? Like
Yeah.
someone isn't quite as happy to see you as they're making out.
Oh, totally.
Today, we're going to take a deep dive into all those little signs that someone maybe, just maybe, isn't that into you. And we're using the wisdom path as our guide for this one.
I think what gets me is how often we just miss these signs,
Yeah.
Because we're all focused on the big picture.
Right. Yeah.
But honestly, it's those little things that can tell you a lot.
So true. So let's jump right in. Let's talk disguised insults and backhanded compliments.
Mm.
Can you even imagine? Someone says, wow, you're so confident for someone with your background.
Ooh.
It sounds kind of positive, right?
Yeah.
But it just leaves this weird feeling.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because what they're really doing is like trying to undermine you.
Yeah.
But they're disguising it as support. Like, oh, here's a handshake, but I've got a tack in my hand.
Exactly. So how do we even tell the difference? How do we know when it's real support and when it's one of these jabs?
Honestly, it's all about how those words make you feel. Like, does it sit right in your gut? If a compliment makes you feel bad about yourself, makes you question things, it's probably not coming from a good place, right? Like, you have a right to feel good about what you've done, and anyone who tries to take that away from you, even in a sneaky way, they're not on your team.
The wisdom path actually quotes Denzel Washington, and I love this. They say, some people will never like you because your spirit irritates their demons.
Oh, that's so good.
That's deep, right?
It is, and it reminds us that sometimes it's not about you. You haven't actually done anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's their own issues, their own insecurities that are driving that dislike. So trying to please everyone, that's a recipe for just being completely wiped out. You gotta focus on the people who already get you and like you for who you are.
Such a good point.
Yeah.
What about when you kind of feel pushed out of the group? Like all your friends are hanging out without you and you're getting these like really vague excuses when you try to make plans.
Oh, I know that feeling, like you're looking in from the outside right
Yeah.
now. It can be so hurtful. But before we jump to conclusions, maybe, just maybe, your energy doesn't fit with that group anymore.
Mhm.
It happens. Sometimes we change, our interests change, and friendships kind of drift apart. It's natural.
The wisdom path talks about effortless relationships. It's a Zen idea, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Basically, if you're constantly forcing your way in, if it feels like a struggle just to be part of the group, that's draining. Zen is all about going with the flow, right? So if a relationship takes so much effort just to keep going, maybe it's time to step back and think. Doesn't mean anyone's a bad person. It might just mean the connection has run its course.
It's like instead of holding on to something that isn't working, we can open up space for new connections that are actually fulfilling.
Right.
The wisdom path uses this image of a tree shedding its old leaves
Oh, I love that.
to make room for new growth.
It's a good visual. It is. And you know what? Those new connections, they often just show up naturally when we're being ourselves, when we're pursuing things we're passionate about. It's not about chasing the right people. It's about being the kind of person they want to be around.
Let's talk about something that's kind of tricky.
Right.
Jokes. What about when someone's always making fun of you, even if you said you don't like it? Like, where's the line?
I mean, humor's tricky, right? What I find funny, you might not.
Right.
But you gotta look at the intention. Are they genuinely trying to be funny? Or is it more about putting you down and kind of like establishing dominance?
The wisdom path gives this example of someone constantly picking on your flaws, your habits, even old mistakes.
Yeah.
Even after you said, hey, not cool. It's like they're trying to sneak in an insult, but they're hiding it behind humor.
Exactly. If it makes you feel bad consistently, it's not harmless fun. And you know what's a good test? Flip it around. Can they take a joke as well as they dish them out? If not, there's a problem there.
It's like true friendship should be about mutual respect,
Right.
laughing with each other, not at each other.
Absolutely. Humor should bring people together, not tear them down. If it crosses that line, it's time to think about that relationship.
Okay, this one's a classic. The person who's always too busy for you, but somehow they manage to find time for everyone else.
Ouch. Yeah.
The wisdom path is spot on with this one. Pay attention to what people do, not just what they say.
So true. If someone really values you, they'll make an effort.
They also suggest this. Ask yourself, if I stopped reaching out, would this person ever contact me?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It makes you think.
It does. And if the answer is probably no, that tells you something about the relationship. You deserve to be with people who are excited to spend time with you, not just fitting you in when it's convenient.
And sometimes letting go of those one-sided friendships, it's hard, but it creates space for something better, something healthier.
For sure. You've got to know your worth. You deserve to be a priority, not an option.
The last sign the wisdom path talks about is fascinating, and it's all about body language.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
So our bodies can sometimes reveal what we're really thinking, even when we try to hide it, right?
Right.
So tell us more about that.
Well, think about it. Leaning away, arms crossed, not making eye contact. It's like their body is mirroring how they feel emotionally, even if they're saying all the right things.
So someone could be saying all the right things, but their body's telling a different story.
Exactly. And it's not always on purpose. These are often subconscious reactions.
And the wisdom path actually says that maybe we shouldn't see it as rejection.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe it's just a sign that our energies don't match.
Yeah.
It's a different way of looking at it, right?
It is. It's not personal. It's just information. Maybe their energy isn't a good fit for you, and that's okay. You can create healthier boundaries, focus on connections that feel good and supportive.
So we've talked about these 4 hidden signs of dislike and what they might tell us about our relationships. What are your thoughts so far?
I don't know. It's just like amazing how these little things, they can really affect us, you know?
Yeah.
They can make us question ourselves, affect how we see ourselves and the choices we make.
Totally.
Recognizing those signs, it's like the first step to taking back control, you know? Like, I'm in charge of my own social life.
It's all about awareness.
Right.
But then, what do we do with all this information? How do we actually use it in our lives?
Well, first of all, trust your gut. If you constantly feel weird or drained around someone, even if you can't put your finger on exactly why, it's okay to back off. You don't need to explain yourself.
It's not about, like, being suspicious of everyone,
Yeah,
right?
no.
It's about listening to your own intuition.
Exactly. And remember, having boundaries, that doesn't make you a bad person.
Yep.
It's about protecting your own energy, your own well-being. You get to choose who you spend time with, how people treat you. That's your right.
The wisdom path actually says that sometimes these signs, they're not even about someone being mean. Sometimes it's just personalities that clash, or a friendship that's kind of run its course.
That's so true. Not everyone who does these things is out to get you. Sometimes they just don't realize what they're doing, how it affects other people, and sometimes people just drift apart. It happens.
So what about those situations where you think maybe someone doesn't like you, but you're not totally sure? Like, what do you do?
Talk about it. Well, it doesn't have to be a huge confrontation. You can just shift your own behavior a bit. Invest less energy in that relationship and see what happens. Do they notice? Do they reach out? Or are they relieved that you've backed off a bit? Their reaction will tell you a lot.
That's smart. It takes the pressure off, right? You don't have to have this big dramatic conversation. You just let things play out naturally.
Exactly. And remember, even if someone really doesn't like you, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
Oh, that's so important.
We're all different, right? We're not going to click with everyone we meet. That's just life.
It's so easy to take it personally, to start wondering what's wrong with us.
Oh, yeah.
But often, it just comes down to, compatibility and shared values.
The wisdom path actually talks about this idea that we become like the 5 people we spend the most time with.
That's a big one.
It is, right. So think about your circle. The people you're closest to, do they lift you up? Do they inspire you? Do they share your values and support your dreams?
Wow. That's a powerful thought. It makes you really think about who you're surrounding yourself with.
Right. It's about being intentional with our friendships, building relationships with people who bring out the best in us. And it's not just about who we hang out with in person. It's also about the stuff we consume, the books we read, the podcasts we listen to.
Oh, that's interesting.
It all shapes how we think, what we believe.
So it's about creating this positive space for ourselves, both online and offline, surrounding ourselves with people and ideas that lift us up.
Exactly. And as we start to recognize these little signs, these signs of dislike, we can choose where we put our energy, who we let into our inner circle.
It's about knowing your worth and choosing to be around people who see it, who appreciate you for who you are.
And remember, building healthy relationships, it's a journey. It takes work, it takes self-awareness, communication, and sometimes letting go of connections that aren't working anymore.
This has been so eye-opening. I mean, we've learned so much. Before we wrap up, any last words of wisdom for our listeners, especially those who might be struggling with some of these challenges?
Just trust your gut. It's a powerful tool. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't be afraid to set boundaries. Remember, you deserve to be surrounded by people who genuinely care about you and want to see you grow.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. This has been a really valuable deep dive into this world of subtle social dynamics.
My pleasure. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember, self-awareness is key to building healthy and fulfilling relationships. Keep learning, keep growing, keep exploring.
And that concludes our deep dive for today. We'll see you next time.
It's crazy, right? These little signs can have such a big impact on how we feel about ourselves and the choices we make about our relationships.
Totally.
But just knowing they're there, that's like the first step.
Right.
Then you can start taking control.
Absolutely. Awareness is so key.
Yeah.
But then what do we do with all this? Okay, we know the signs. Now, how do we actually use this in our lives?
It starts with trusting your gut. If something feels off, if you're always uncomfortable or drained around someone, even if you can't say exactly why, just back off. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone.
It's not about being suspicious of everyone we meet.
Right. No, not at all. It's more like tuning into your own intuition, what's my gut telling me?
Right.
And setting boundaries, that's not a bad thing. It's actually healthy. It's about protecting yourself, your energy, your well-being. You get to choose who you spend time with and how people treat you. That's important.
The Wisdom Path says that sometimes these signs, they're not even about someone being intentionally mean.
Right.
It might just be personalities that clash or a friendship that's just run its course.
Exactly. It's easy to assume the worst, they're doing this on purpose to hurt me.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people just don't realize how their actions affect others. And sometimes friendships just fade. It's just part of life.
So what do you do if you think someone might not like you, but you're not 100% sure?
I mean, you could try talking about it, but it doesn't have to be this huge dramatic thing. You could also try just changing your own behavior a little bit, invest less energy in that relationship and see how they react. Do they even notice? Do they try to reach out? Or are they kind of relieved that you've stepped back?
That's a good point.
You can learn a lot just by observing.
I like that. It takes the pressure off.
Yeah. And another thing to remember, even if someone genuinely doesn't like you, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
That is so important to remember.
We're all different, right? We're not going to click with every single person we meet. That's just reality.
It's so easy to take it personally and start doubting ourselves.
I know.
But so much of it comes down to compatibility, shared values.
Right. The Wisdom Path has this great quote. It says, we become like the 5 people we spend the most time with.
Whoa, that's powerful.
Right. So think about your closest friends. Do they inspire you? Do they share your values? Do they have your back?
It makes you really stop and think about those relationships.
It does. And it's not just about who we hang out with in person. It's also about what we consume, the books we read, the podcasts we listen to.
That's interesting.
It all influences us, shapes how we see the world.
So it's about being mindful of what we let into our lives, both online and offline.
Exactly. We want to create this positive, supportive environment for ourselves, surround ourselves with people and ideas that lift us up.
It's about knowing what you deserve and choosing to be around people who see that, who appreciate you, for you.
And remember, relationships take work. It's a constant process of learning, communicating, growing. And sometimes it means letting go of connections that just aren't working anymore.
Well, this has been such an incredible conversation, so eye-opening. I feel like we've covered so much ground.
Yeah, it's been great.
Before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners, especially those who might be feeling a little lost or unsure about some of these things?
Listen to your intuition. If you feel like something's not right in a relationship, it probably isn't. Don't be afraid to set boundaries. You deserve to be surrounded by people who genuinely care about you, who want to see you thrive.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. This has been a truly deep dive into this whole world of social dynamics.
It's been my pleasure. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. Remember, self-awareness is so powerful. It's the key to building healthy, happy relationships. Keep learning, keep growing, keep exploring.
And that wraps up our deep dive for today. We'll see you next time. It's so easy to overthink everything in relationships.
Tell me about it.
You forget that you actually have some say in who you spend your time with.
Right. And it's not about being the most popular person or anything. It's about choosing the connections that really matter, the ones that feel good.
The Wisdom Path has this amazing quote from Brian Tracy. You become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. Choose wisely.
Wow, that really hits home.
Doesn't it? It's like our friends, they don't just influence us a little, they actually shape who we are, what we believe.
If you're always around negative people, it's going to rub off on you. But if you're with positive, supportive people who want to see you grow,
yeah,
you're going to pick up on those good vibes too.
So it's not just about ditching the bad influences.
Right.
It's also about actively looking for those relationships that inspire you, that lift you up.
Exactly. Think of it like a garden, you know?
Okay.
You gotta pull out the weeds, but you also gotta plant the seeds for the flowers you want.
This has been such a great conversation, so insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
It's been my pleasure. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the subtle signs of dislike.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
We hope you learned a thing or two that you can take with you.
Remember, awareness is the first step. Just start paying attention to these little signs, these subtle cues.
Yeah, you'll be surprised what you learn about your relationships.
And don't forget, you get to choose who you let into your world. Surround yourself with people who see your worth, who support your dreams, who make you feel good about being you.
That's what it's all about, right?
That's it for our deep dive today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.